In our last discussion video, we talked about new awarenesses and how they offer us a new path to understand our reason for being. And one of the most important new awarenesses we introduced was about living in the paradox. And that was one of the most significant of the new awarenesses that we could reach. And we're going to talk about that, the paradox, in this particular discussion video. But first, I want to just make a brief comment about our journey to get to that recognition and those awarenesses, and how sometimes our paths can take us under the auspices of gurus and spiritual advisors and ministers, etc. All of these leaders tend to lead us by talking about the how of our daily life. How to find meaning from the seeming confusion in our daily efforts, how to think, how the mind works, how the mind might be tricking us, so to speak, and how perhaps to reorient yourself to reality. However, either the religious texts or the religious leaders, they usually never give a coherent map of reality or realities. They never give a coherent map from this reality to the next reality. Again, they talk about how, but they don't talk about why or what or where, such as why it is you came to be. What were the circumstances of your birth? Or what is it that you're doing here? What is your purpose for being born? Or once you know your purpose, where are the fruits of your labor used? Which would be actually past the portal of death. But if your efforts and your awareness and your understandings and your labors and the fruits of your activities, if they're not used, then that's tantamount to saying that they have no use. And if the fruits of your labor have no use, then your existence, basically, per se, also does not have a use. So that's what I mean when what we need is that coherent map that takes us from before birth and into the middle of this process, giving clarity to our life, and then explains what that process was all about going forward past the portal of death. Once you know why you came into being and why you pass the portal of death, why you die, then it becomes self-evident on how to live your life to be the most fruitful and the most aware. So that's just a little comment I wanted to make before we get on to the paradox, which is what we'll do right now. So as we stated at the end of the last video, one of the most fundamental realizations to come from a greater awareness is that the new cognitive system of which you become aware is enveloped within the paradox. The paradox is nature at its most complete, intertwining both the material and the immaterial aspects of our being. It exudes the extraordinary from the ordinary. The paradox goes beyond natural laws supported by reason and logic and reveals a relationship which we are tied to before birth and after death. It is the presence of duality in all things where the possible and the impossible form a complete creation, where we, as unique individuals, are perceived as creations within the paradox. And here we embody aspects of our being that are self-contradictory and yet true in the same sense as the particle-wave dualism of quantum mechanics. In that quantum mechanics dualism, there is a paradox in which it has been scientifically proven a singular object is a particle and a wave at the same time. So it's two different states of the same thing at the same time. Within the new cognitive system of understanding and awarenesses within the paradox, there are forces and agencies that naturally exist but cannot be seen or felt in only 3 dimensions with linear reasoning. The paradox itself is where nature accepts the contradictory, the incredible, and the logic which goes beyond common belief. Perhaps on its face the paradox is absurd, yet upon close consideration, how much different is it than our understanding of life? Our greatest reasoning and purest form of logic, mathematics, points to the greater nature of things through the rigors and mysteries of quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics reveals in truth that particles can come into existence out of nowhere and then return. A mathematical entanglement establishes actions and relationships where information travels faster than even the speed of light, and caused Einstein to once say that represents his quote, spooky actions at a distance. The string theory in quantum mechanics establishes that we live in a world with as many as not 3, but 12 dimensions. We just can't see or sense them. We're essentially like the fictitious flatlanders that lived in only 2 dimensions and could not conceive or perceive or believe that a 3rd dimension existed. The harder, longer, and deeper we look, we find reality appears to be more of an illusion, and illusion seems somehow to be more real. The list is almost endless of discovered paradox by our very own science. The larger understanding is, as it draws out even more functionality of our being, that we are certainly living in a paradox, and within the paradox, destiny is the active agency that transcends separate realities, our reality with the next. We are a link within a link of a chain, with links within links of realities. Our being and purpose is crucial to the other links of the realities of nature. In the paradox, there is nothing known greater than nature. Nature flows seamlessly between realities just as it flows seamlessly across our lives. It is within nature that we will fulfill our purpose and reason for being regardless of our consent or knowledge. Now, this is a little bit difficult to follow here, but let me just say, within the paradox, relationships exist only between you and nature, and there is never a conflict, because we simply do not have the will nor the freedom to change nature. Our will does not change the nature of our purpose of being. At most, it reflects an understanding of it. There are inherent and distinct challenges to an awareness that strays from the norm when taking in these considerations. Sometimes the paradox can be glimpsed, felt, or intuited without a complete recognition of what it is. But once the paradox has come into your awareness, as practitioners, there's no erasing that knowledge. There's no turning back once one steps deliberately onto the path of the paradox. Greater perceptions will lead to altered beliefs, behaviors, and the quality of intent. As part of the paradox, our being, as such, organic and inorganic, spiritual, by nature, has the fundamental life coda of DNA. We have the DNA and shadow DNA, whose material and immaterial characteristics express themselves in one another. In other words, our material being was formed, and we know this scientifically, through the genetics of our organic DNA. Our inorganic being, the spiritual part of us, also has a coda of DNA, which would be our shadow DNA. Through this effect and through the stream of our intent, we are able and available then to access knowledge directly rather than indirectly through our reason and logic. This is simply a dimensional effect, since the mind and the spirit perceive both independently and in harmony in pursuit of awareness. It is our ability to perceive in the paradox that is truly mysterious and magical. Perception is the precursor to awareness. This perception is the direct result of our unbending intent to engage the paradox. And destiny is the single-threaded force that pulls us on to the path of awareness. Now, I'm going to give a quick example here, perhaps, of religion and the paradox. And we're going to talk about when Christ was crucified on the cross. Christ on the cross exemplifies the paradox in force. Christ, as perceived from within the paradox, was both human and divine at the same time, in the same space, in the same being, with the same functionalities. That destiny had brought him to the cross was yet the action of nature at its highest. It was from this destiny he could gain an even more complete awareness. Because Christ was human, he was organically constrained with human awareness. And it was from this human perception that he cried out from the cross, quote, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" In this, Christ was essentially asking, as a human son might, why have you given me a task and now relegated and destined me to failure by not letting me complete what I was intended to complete? However, from the echoing destiny of greater awareness, we can know the answer unheard by the masses come forth. As God replied, I have not forsaken you. I sent you in service, tasked with saving and showing the way to save souls, which you have completed. Now it is finished. With this, the humanly acquired greater awareness, Christ then turned his head and, satisfied, looked on the many and repeated, "It is finished." It was within the paradox of his human and divine embodiments that Christ was unaware, while at the same time all-knowing, with nature's incredible scope truly exposed for all to witness. But that may be a little far afield, and we then, in the next video, will continue on with this coherent map of how we came to be from before our birth, the purpose of life, and the fruits of our labor as we pass the portal of death. So, until that next video, peace, comfort, and awareness.